Well, in part one of this story, we learned that the Army was not, shall we say, very happy about the treatment that it had received over the years from American civilians. And the Army will move into an area called New Windsor, which is about 2 miles inland from the Hudson River, on the west side of the Hudson River, about 10 miles north of West Point, roughly 60 miles north of New York City. And the Army is in a very bad mood. Washington wrote Congress in October of 1782, and he said the patience and long sufferance of this army are almost exhausted. Well, what was the exhaustion about? The exhaustion in particular comes to be focused on the matter of pay. It comes to be focused on the matter of pensions. And the problem is the Continental Congress still doesn't really have, that is, under the Articles of Confederation, still doesn't have any means of funding. It doesn't have a source of revenue. And this is what's going to happen. It's one of the triggering factors in the Newburgh Conspiracy, and that is there's been a plan afloat to amend the Articles of Confederation and to give the Confederation the ability to tax imports. 5% of the value of all imports that would come into the United States, imported goods, that revenue would go to Congress, which in turn could pay off the Continental Army and pay other creditors to the Revolution. But in November of 1782, shortly after the Army moves into the New Windsor cantonment just outside of Newburgh, what will happen is one lone state, that of Rhode Island, will vote against giving Congress the power of taxation. And that's really a blow to the Army, because with the power of taxation, maybe the officers would get those pensions or get some form of significant pay. Maybe the soldiers would have gotten some sort of back wages, but that hasn't happened. So it's going to be at this point that a group of the general officers, featuring such leaders as Henry Knox, Chief of Artillery, Horatio Gates, who's the second in command at Newburgh, these officers will begin to say, we have got to put pressure on Congress and the states, or we're going to perhaps go away with nothing, not even pay for all of our efforts on behalf of winning the war for independence. So they will write a petition. And this is not a friendly, everyday, thank you for what you've done kind of a petition. It's rather menacing and threatening. Once this petition is written, primarily authored by Henry Knox, but with the blessings of Horatio Gates, who's going to come to play an important part in this story, and also with the knowledge of George Washington, who is concerned that the Army not be thrown out without some form of just compensation, a group of three will take this petition and they will ride overland to Philadelphia, and they will present it to Congress right at the end of 1782, in late December of 1782. And what I'd like to do is just read a short cut from that petition, because you'll see that this is not a friendly document, rather a threatening document. The officer's petition goes like this. This is a long document. This is just a sampling of what's there. They wrote, "We have borne all that men can bear. Our property is expended. Our private resources are at an end, and our friends are wearied out and disgusted with our incessant applications for credit." And then they will go on to say, if you don't do something for us, that any further, and I'm quoting from the document, any further experiments on their, that is the Army's patience, may have fatal effects. Quote, unquote. Think fatal effects. What were they doing? They were threatening Congress, and they were saying, what we want you to do is to take that promise of half pay, we want you to commute it into regular pay, and we expect to receive just financial compensation before we disband. The idea is to pressure Congress and to pressure the states into getting some form of permanent revenue into the hands of the Congress, so that the Congress could take care of the Army properly from a financial point of view. Now, what's going to happen then is in the next couple of months, there's going to be a vigorous debate. Some leaders in Congress, we call them nationalists, will advocate to get that power of taxation in the hands of Congress, but many others believe that it would be best to keep power closer to the people in the hands of the states. And then another triggering mechanism comes along, and that is in mid-February, in fact, February 12th of 1783, word is reached in Philadelphia that there's going to be a peace settlement, that there's a preliminary peace settlement. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because you would think everyone would be celebrating, but they weren't celebrating up in Newburgh at the New Windsor Cantonment, because that meant the Army could be disbanded and no one would get paid. And that leads us then to the third stage of this growing crisis, the Newburgh Conspiracy of 1782-1783.